Our barbell bench press is a strength move for the chest. It is also working the triceps and the front portion of the shoulders as well. This may seem like a pretty straightforward, simple exercise. You may have done this before in the past, but there are a lot of little key components you may not be aware of that will help you in the long run not only continue to make progress, but also reduce the risk of injury as you're going up in weight. So a few key things to remember. We're going to be using a bench and a rack here for that barbell bench press. If you do not have these available to you, you're more than welcome to do a dumbbell bench press instead. So you would just be using those 2 dumbbells instead of using a barbell here. We want to line up the bar when we come down into position right about with our forehead. That way when we lift off the rack and go into performing those presses, we're not going to be hitting those J hooks. That's really common for a lot of people, is to come down onto that bench, back up a little too far, lift it off, and while they're performing the sets, they end up hitting those J hooks and it's going to throw you off. So make sure you line it up to about with the forehead. Another key thing to remember is even though this exercise is focusing on the upper body, we want those legs to be firmly, or those feet to be firmly planted into the floor for a good, stable base of support. This may not be a big issue, especially when the weight is light, but as you progress to a much heavier weight and it's more challenging for you, this is going to be vital for, like I said, 1, being able to work harder and push more weight, and 2, reducing the risk of injury. A lot of times I see people, mostly beginners, when it's getting tough on a chest press, and they're pressing here, they'll end up twisting or they'll kick their legs out or things like that to help get that weight up. We want to essentially do the opposite of that. When it starts to get really tough, we want to press those feet even harder into the floor so that we have a really strong base of support to stabilize our core and to help drive from. So the key spots that we are pressing from are going to be those shoulder blades and those feet. So those are the main key points. We're pushing those shoulder blades down into the bench, and we're also pushing the feet down into the floor to create a good, stable base of support for our pressing. So sit down on that bench, feet flat on the floor, about bent to about a 90. We're going to lay back on that bench. We're going to line that bar right on up to about with our forehead. I like to roll the bar forward to the front of the J hooks and then line it up with my forehead. That way it's a little more accurate. If you're at the back and you line it up, it can still have those J hooks in the way. So roll that bar forward to the front of the J hooks, line it up with the forehead. We're going to grab that bar at a width just outside of shoulder width. So about 90 degrees. My wrist almost directly above the elbows. That's about the grip I want to take on the bar. A little closer in, you're going to be working a little more of the triceps. A little further out, you're going to be putting a little more pressure on the shoulders. We want to try to focus as much as we can on our chest with a little bit of triceps and shoulders in there, but primarily chest, and typically that's the spot where we're going to be able to lift the most weight as well. So, feet flat on the floor, get your grip, line it up with the forehead. Last thing I want you to remember is we're going to squeeze those shoulder blades down and back into that bench. We're going to retract them. That is going to make sure that we're using the chest to press and not just the front head of the shoulders. So come on down, get your grip, line it up, then squeeze those shoulder blades back and together. Just a little slight arch in the back is fine. We don't want a huge arch in the back. We want just a slight arch as we press those shoulder blades down and back into the bench. We're then going to lift that weight off, bring it right over top of the chest. Nice and controlled, we're going to lower all the way down, and then exhale as we press back up. We're not going to lock those elbows at the top. That's going to put all that strain on the joint. We're going to keep just a slight bend in them so we keep pressure on the muscle. Again, lower right down, right to about the sternum, right below the chest. Exhale as we press back up. As we lower down, those elbows are not flaring out wide like this. They're coming down at about a 45. So you can see we're not way up here with those elbows. We're not way down here with those elbows where we're using more triceps. We're at about a 45 here, a nice natural relaxed position that's going to put all that pressure on the chest. Last thing to remember, when you are done with those chest presses, we're going to keep those arms fairly straight, go all the way back to where we're hitting those J hooks, and then lower that weight back on down into the rack. That is going to ensure that we do not miss those J hooks. If you miss those J hooks and you think you're in there, it's easy to injure yourself by just giving out with one arm, and then you're putting all that strain on one side of the body as that bar comes down. So make sure you come all the way back into the J hooks before resting it down on the hooks. Start off light on this exercise. Start off with just the bar, especially if you've not done it before. If you have trouble keeping your feet down on the floor, start light and focus instead on keeping those feet planted. Once you get comfortable and you've kind of ingrained that movement by pushing into the floor instead of letting them kick up as you start to tire out, then start progressing up in weight on here. So get those basics down, then start pushing it to where you're having a challenging weight for the chest for this exercise.